At least that's something relatively positive or optimistic in the sense that despite the relatively higher inflation and higher interest rates due to the Fed rate hikes to better manage inflation. So, and of course, the risk of US recession due to the aggressive Fed rate hikes to effectively bring down inflation. So, well, that's something. Well, it still shows the resilience of the country because of the attractive demographics as the economy reopened towards greater normalcy. So if you look at the metrics, so no more restrictions. In fact, since the latter part of October, the wearing of masks is optional, and all systems go. The missing elements of the recovery, they're back on track, like tourism, especially foreign tourism. In fact, the group tours from China already resumed since the latter part of January as China reopened its economy since December. And of course, the economic reopening narrative in China, which is the world's second biggest economy, that would definitely help. Also, the global economic growth. Of course, the challenges remain the relatively higher prices or inflation, but in the coming months, year-on-year inflation is expected to decelerate. And well, actually, that's related to global oil prices also. That's why OPEC just made this surprise cut in production output by more than 1 million barrels per day. Because that's a sign of actually being defensive because oil prices have gone down sharply. Well, in fact, it came from the lowest since December of 2021, the lowest in 15 months. It reached to NYMEX oil reached around 64.5 barrels per day. Imagine the peak of oil at the start of the early part of the Russia-Ukraine war, March 7 of 2022, more than a year ago. The peak was $130. So imagine it reached just half of that, just 64 to $65. That's the reason why OPEC Plus just decided to cut output to be on the defensive because oil prices have been on a declining trend. Of course, it's never an assurance also that oil prices would go up in a sustainable manner. We have seen this episode in the past couple of months where they have tried cutting output, but nonetheless, the underlying downward correction or the downward trend in oil still persisted. But of course, it's really just to also, it's really to combat speculators, those who make short sales on oil and try to make money by shorting oil. So they're trying to burn them and teach them a lesson and not to unduly speculate because of course they're also protecting their revenues, of course, for their respective countries, especially those that really depend on oil for
Right.
their major source for their spending on various infrastructure and other government spending in their respective
Yes.
countries.
But ADB cited labor services and infra spending as the main drivers of this growth, no? But do you see sustainable growth in these factors or sectors rather?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's true, Angela, because infrastructure spending, that's a bright spot of the economy. Well, it has been sustained at more than 5% of GDP. This is far higher compared if you look 10, 20 years back, it's just less than 2% of GDP. And during the pandemic, this has been a steady source of growth and going forward as well. And as well as well, of course, the trickle down effects in terms of job creation. The path of these infrastructure projects would also create pockets of growth. Well, I'd say the various toll roads, the expansion of airport projects, and so on. That would also attract more foreign direct investments, and as well as increase and improve the mobility and the movement of workers, tourists, and as well as goods and services, both exports and imports. So yeah, that's one bright spot. Also, the labor data, jobs data among the best since the pandemic started. Unemployment rate at 4% levels lately. In fact, it even came from the lowest or the best levels in 17 years. Well, because of the reopening narrative of the economy that effectively overshadowed, well, the offsetting risk factors like higher prices or inflation, higher interest rates, the risk of recession in the U.S. and other headwinds. So yeah, and well, of course, on top of the other bright spots, we have a very attractive demographics. More than 110 million Filipinos, the 12th
Right.
largest in the world. Yeah, go ahead.
Mike, I'm going to bring this back to the OPEC plus production cut that was announced this week. Now, if we can look back, they already cut production back in October of 2022. And a lot of the inflation that the whole world, not just the Philippines, is feeling now, this is a lot because of oil prices after the Russian invasion of the Ukraine. Now, the International Energy Agency, I'm going to quote them, they said that these production cuts could be the tipping point that pushes the world into recession. What would you have to say about that statement from the IEA?
Yeah, let's see in the coming days if indeed, now the NYMEX crude oil price is at $81. That's the highest in more than 2 months since January 27 of this year. So we ended the year 2022 at a little over $80 per barrel. So it's just $1 higher. It's really that it has really declined to a low of 64 to $65 just a few days ago. So yeah, that's why considering that the peak or the highest was $130 and the start of the war of the Russia-Ukraine war, it was at 92. It's still lower by about $12 since then. So practically all the increase of global oil price has been erased since the war started, and it goes to show also because it may have to do with demand and supply. The higher prices of oil effectively also reduce the demand, the curtailing of demand, and of course the shift to renewables. But yeah, going forward, this move, we have yet to see if the upward correction would be sustained because so far we're just back to the familiar ranges, as you pointed out. Because when they did their last cuts since late last year, so it's just trying to smoothen the underlying downward trend at the very least. So, well, hopefully the inflation would still be, the year-on-year inflation would be on a downward trend because at least we have seen the worst already.